Hello everybody, that's right, lords, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, and all the rest of that. Great and glorious, soon to be famous one day, Nick Dutch back on the camera again one more time. I might be a little incoherent in this particular video because I've had quite a long day. Having a long day, being busy with work is good. But my earnings are still about 1/4 or 1/3 what they were before the recession really kicked in. And even then things weren't all that good for me. So if any of you think that the tarot reader who's good and wants to work ethically is going to become like a rich person, then you got to think again, seriously. Anyway, going back on with talking about Thomas Paine and The Age of Reason, which is the book I've been reading online recently. It's still quite fascinating. I've got to the end of the first part, as it's called, and there's been more references to nature carrying on with the same kind of train of thought, the same kind of argument which Thomas Paine does, essentially about nature and the fact that nature is quite so amazing. So some of that is quite nice and quite poetic, as I mentioned before, but I just skim-read through some of those sections because I didn't really explain more about his point of view. So I just let some of that slide. But there are a few other things that came into play when I was reading, which helped me to understand where he was coming from. He talked about the revealed religions, namely, of course, the main religions, having mysteries, having miracles, and having prophecies. And that these were a bad thing, because mysteries obscure any truth whatsoever. And that's a bad thing because he's a person who believes in a truth. As far as miracles are concerned, he says that, well, the individual could be lying if they're saying that they saw something miraculous and all the rest of that, so essentially that's something which is bad or a negative. And he says something similar about prophecy as well. So he's very against a lot of the texts. He also mentions the fact that religious texts have gone through translations and revisions, and so any original meaning is essentially lost. And this is one of his main arguments against Orthodox religion. But his arguments towards his interpretation of deism, I personally feel, are still a bit shaky. Remember that some of these arguments are very close to the arguments which are applied in creationism, and as such, we've got more knowledge now than we had a couple of hundred years ago when Thomas Paine was doing his writing. So we've got less of a reason to believe in a creator God being, and we've got more of a reason to think of a non-theological creation of the universe, or at least that's the way it appears to myself. Although the universe itself, it's still big, beautiful, immense, powerful, and all the rest of that, it's still, quite frankly, occurring in accordance with natural forces, natural laws, evolution, gravity, all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to creation-esque ideas, I'm more inclined to think WTF. I mean, seriously, I don't really feel the connection between creation-based ideas and the concept of God. Now, Thomas Paine is suggesting that we should be looking to the universe and the bounty of the universe and the bounty of the natural world and think about how great God has been to us because this creation has been provided. And from that to infer that we should be as good to other people as the Creator has been to us to provide us with this planet and the rest of that. But you've got to think to yourself, has creation actually been all that good in lots of different ways? In my case, creation has provided me with numerous allergies, gut infections, a history of chronic fatigue syndrome. It's provided me with nutritional deficiencies in certain key things, so I've got to carry on taking nutritional supplements and going for checkups with specialists once in a while, and this is bad enough. But let's say I had these conditions and I was in an earthquake zone, or I was in a tsunami zone, could I still feel the sense of bounty and wonderment of God's creation? If I was doing okay for myself, if I was very wealthy, very healthy, and had everything, and did not want for anything, then it would be easier for a person to assume that everything had been provided, and that some kind of connection to a higher power was associated with this. I met a person recently who was obviously very well to do for himself, and he denied evolution. And I started thinking to myself, maybe one of the reasons for that is because he has everything that he wants. He was so wealthy he didn't have to work. And that started the chain of thinking that maybe some of these creation-esque models of the world are more likely to occur in people who are very rich or not very educated or don't have the desire to ask questions. So maybe there's certain groups, intellectual groups of people who think this way. And was Thomas Paine in one of those categories? Was he personally a category of individual who thinks like this? Also, as far as creation is concerned, realistically, who cares how the universe was created? I know I most certainly am interested in what the scientists say, because essentially they've pointed to established facts of nature, and that's useful. But as far as was God involved, well, I don't think I care. If God does exist, then why would he care that I cared? And surely it's more a question of what I do that's more important than to have faith in the creation of the universe, or indeed that there was a creator who created the universe. Where does the point lie? I can still see a rationale for a belief of sorts in a higher power for the purposes of doing benefit to the individual who holds that belief and performs some exercises of a theistic nature, such as, as I've mentioned before, prayer, meditation, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. That I can see. But why there has got to be this correlation between a God concept and creation completely escapes me, and Thomas Paine, so far, has not really explained the rationale or the justification for that. He's created, or is trying to create, so it seems, a new conceptualization of religion based upon the physical world, the knowable physical universe. But that does not really speak to me, and possibly other individuals, on a transformative level. It can fill you full of awe and wonderment, yeah, but does that have a way of explaining states of mind or emotional combinations, or does it provide you with the ability to overcome some kind of psychological issue, or give you some kind of better reflection upon the human condition? I'm not sure whether it does. And therefore I would have to say that Thomas Paine is missing out on something. Another point I would raise would be that it is an important stage in the intellectual evolution or development, shall we say, of humanity, to have a movement which is based upon the writings of Thomas Paine. It's a stage in our development. But I feel that there needs to be some kind of not convergence but divergence, namely splitting apart of these two ideas of, number one, creation and how the universe developed, and number two, spirituality and theistic activities. Because what is the point in connecting them? There isn't any. From what we know from the people who do hypnotherapy, mind-altering exercises can have an effect upon the mind. From what we know about people who do neurolinguistic programming exercises, the use of words in mantra and as affirmations can also have an effect upon human consciousness. That would make more sense to be turned into a religious practice than to believe something for which there's no real correlation with personal change, such as belief in the creator of the universe. As I said, if God did create the universe and he's supposed to be all kind and all knowing and all wonderful, then that would raise questions about disease, plagues, tornadoes, swarms, and a wide variety of other issues which come out of the natural world. It's not the kindness of God which gives us tsunamis or earthquakes, surely. And if we were to act as kindly as a God which has provided us with earthquakes, tsunamis, disease, bubonic plague, then we will be acting in a manner which is so inhuman and sick and uncaring that it doesn't do us any good. This is my issue with the creation argument.